Hi, I'm John Stevenson, and we're going to be looking at the monastic movement in our continuing survey of church history. We begin with Saint Anthony. He lives from 251 to 356, although we have a few different dates as the date of his death. This is a more conservative view. Some reports have him living even older. He is a Christian living in Egypt, and he hears a sermon on Christ's words to the rich young ruler, where Jesus says, "Go and sell all your possessions and follow me," and he takes that sermon literally. He takes those words literally. He sells everything he has, and he goes out into the desert. Now, to get out into the desert from Egypt, you just have to go out of the valley. I mean, it's not a very far trek. But he goes out into the desert, finds an abandoned cave or a house or some sort of place to dwelling, and he just stays there. Gives away his possessions, moves into the desert, and begins living the life of a hermit. After a while, folks notice that he's out there, and word gets out there's a holy man living out there, and so some people come out to see him, and they say, "Well, we want to be your disciples." He says, "I don't want disciples. I'm here by myself," and so he eventually has to move to a different location. He will come back into town once in a while, and he does stay in contact with the church. He has some interactions with Athanasius, for example, but he lives the life of a hermit, and there are others that begin to follow his example. Now, one such is Simon. He gets the nickname Stylites because he removes himself to the top of a pillar. He's living in Syria, and he finds this pillar and just gets a ladder and goes up there. And of course, somebody's going to have to pass him. He lowers a line. We'll have to pass him food and water. And I guess when he has to get rid of things, you remember no bathrooms up on top of a pillar. I guess he just drops it off the side. Not sure exactly how that works out logistically, but he spends most of his life on top of a pillar, and people think, oh, that must be a really holy man, and so somebody goes and finds a taller pillar, and they're actually seeing who can be the higher Christian. Pachomius, he's another Christian, born in Thebes, and forcibly inducted into the military. But he converts to Christianity, and he follows the example of Anthony. He's also out in the desert, but after a while he thinks, it might be better, instead of just people out there by themselves, if we had communal monastic living. And so he organizes 9 groups of both male and female monasteries. Now, monasticism in the West versus monasticism in the East, and when I say this, I'm painting with a very, very broad brush. There's certainly exceptions, but I think these points still hold up, that in the West you have communal living, but usually within some proximity to civilization. Whereas in the East, and by East I'm including Egypt and Syria and places like that, you have desert living, because that's where the desert is, and sometimes they're in community and sometimes they're alone. Now, you do have, monastic living by themselves in the West, but it more often, what we read about, what we learn about, is this communal sort of living. In the West, there's an emphasis, somewhat, still in reaching out to culture. Now, it depends where you go, which monastery, but I still think that's true. Whereas in the East, the tendency is to escape culture. You're going out to the desert, you're going away from everybody else, and you're really escaping culture. One example of this is seen in St. Catherine's Monastery. You go to the traditional location of Mount Sinai, and there on our lower left screen, or I have a blow up here for us, we have St. Catherine's Monastery at the foot of Mount Sinai, and it's been there for nearly 1600 years. The monastery continues today. Actually, it was at this monastery a number of years ago, back in the 1800s, when Count Tischendorf was passing through this area, and he happened to spend the night in this monastery. And he discovered some scrolls that were in a bin. Now, presumably, they were in a bin near the fireplace where they were going to be used for kindling. I don't know if that's... Later priests said, no, that wasn't really true. Maybe there was a misunderstanding. but he found in these scrolls some very old, some of our oldest copies of the New Testament were found here at St. Catherine's Monastery. Notice the lettering on the stairwell here. It says Jacobus, or what we would say Jacob. Now, Benedict of Nursia, he's one of these monastics. He runs away to live in a cave at the age of 14. He establishes a monastery at Monte Cassino in the Italian peninsula. And he organizes a series of rules which become codified and borrowed and adapted for many different monasteries. The rule of Saint Benedict. In his rule of Saint Benedict, and I'm quoting from the book Documents of the Christian Church, idleness is the enemy of the soul, and therefore at fixed times the brothers ought to be occupied in manual labor, and again at fixed times in sacred reading. So you actually have a schedule of events that are supposed to take place. He goes on to say, the brothers shall wait on each other in turn, so that no one shall be excused from the kitchen work, unless he be prevented by sickness or by preoccupation with some matter of great necessity. Let not the younger brothers have beds by themselves, but dispersed among the seniors, and when they rise for the service of God, let them gently encourage one another, because the sleepy ones are apt to make excuses. There's some folk that just say, hit the snooze alarm. They didn't have that back then, so this is the ancient version of that. Now I want to take you to Matera. This is in Greece now, and you're on the plains of Thessaly, and as you move westward, you come to these great giant rocks. It looks like these giant rocks have just fallen from the sky. On this photo, notice I'm going to do a blow up. We're going to zoom in, and you can barely see a little spot on the lower part of the screen. That's a person who's rappelling down this cliff face, just to get an idea of the immensity of these rock faces. And here at Matera you have again a series of monasteries that were established by the Greeks, and in later years Greece was overrun by the Turks, and Islam swept through this area. And yet the monasteries continued to exist. It's way up, very difficult to get to. They have, I'm standing by what you would call the ancient elevator. I certainly wouldn't get on it, and I've been known to be a bit of a risk taker. And when the Turks were eventually driven out, they eventually left Greece. It was the folks in the monasteries who came back down and said, you people of Greece, let us tell you of the Christ that you used to worship. This is still, we're still a Christian nation. Let us guide you back into the way of that. And they had a dramatic impact upon the Greek nation. Just one more shot of Matera. And so monasteries have been places of learning, of culture, of passing on scriptures and writings, and they have occupied an important place in Christian history.